On this 7th episode of the S.B.R. podcast, we are joined by the multi-talented Suzie Cool. Suzie is currently serving as the multimedia journalist and in-area host for the Rochester Americans. Suzie, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I feel like it was just yesterday that both you and I were hanging out at PPG Paints Arena.
Well, yeah, different
interns for the
back then, right? Console Energy.
Yeah, Console Energy Center. Yeah, I was about to say that because I was thinking back to our time there, but back when we were interns with the Penguins.
I know it's been like 4 years. Yeah, 4 years since then. It's crazy.
5.
5 years?
5. That was back in the fall of
That's 2015 fall, and that's the year they won the cup too.
Yep.
Wow. No, but it's great to see you. It's awesome to have you on the show. I know you'll have a lot to kind of lend to our subscribers here. People have been asking for a sports broadcaster, multimedia journalist. So you fit the bill, and this is exciting.
Awesome.
So yeah, I mean, why don't we go off of that? If you don't mind telling our audience kind of about your background and describing what you've done so far in your career in a short period of time.
Yeah, I always kind of make a joke about this because I could literally go on for probably an hour about just what I've done. I can't believe that it's even been 7 years at this point. But I have had, like you said, a number of jobs in a number of different areas within the sports world. So like, I started off as a Pittsburgh Pirates ball girl, and that kind of opened the door for me just in Pittsburgh in general within the sports media market. Actually, when I got hired with the Pittsburgh Penguins as a media relations intern about a year and a half later after I first got that ball girl job, Jason Seidling, our boss, told me, he's like, yeah, I basically hired you because you were a ball girl. And I thought that was pretty cool. And I was like, oh, great. You really didn't think I could add any value.
Well, just so you know, he thought my dad was Sean McDonough. That's the only reason I got hired.
Well, good. I'm glad that we both got hired for just random reasons. That
didn't
really
have to know that after the end of my internship, but I'm, whatever.
Yeah, like nothing that actually applied to her job, which I think is pretty funny when we look back at that now. You and I didn't really know much about hockey. I think you're kind of in the same boat as that.
Yeah,
so when we got that internship, we were completely lost. I remember you and I were kind of like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to try to write game notes. And if we couldn't, Allie would take over.
They assigned me to Clarkson University for a reason. They were like, they pushed me to the team, the small college team for that.
Yeah. There's barely any stats here. You just take this one. I'm pretty sure I had Robert Morris, and they were actually like pretty good.
Well, that was also the local team too, so
yeah.
A lot of pressure
so I
there.
was like, okay, I'm local. So yeah, maybe that's why they kind of like pushed those teams on us for that.
Yeah.
What was that called? The Three Rivers Classic.
Three Rivers Classic, and I went back and looked at it actually because I've been compiling some of my old work, and it's funny. You see Robert Morris's graphic image. You see Penn State. I think there was one other. There was another team. Who else was in the tournament?
It had to be
I can't
Penn
remember.
State. Yeah, I can't remember either.
Anyway, my graphic wasn't in there, so obviously it wasn't good. So yeah, so that was the last little blip. But we did our best. Here we are 5 years later. So yeah, what else have you been up to?
We did our best 5 years later. So anyways, after that, I don't know if you know this, but I was always a huge fan of taking the stats or like intermission reports down to the TV people down at the Captain Morgan Club. And honestly, I can admit to this day, and the video guys that were down there, they would probably admit it too, is like I would go down there and I would just talk their ear off. Basically, so by the end of the internship, I said, hey, if anything opens up at the TV station, which used to be Root Sports Pittsburgh, now AT&T Sports Network, I was like, if anything opens up, just let me know. Well, a couple of them added me on Facebook, and when an internship opened at the sports television station in Pittsburgh, they reached out, they gave me the application, and then that led me to my next job in the Pittsburgh sports world as a live content coordinator at one point, but I was a live production intern at first.
Okay.
And then, so I did that for like the summer of 2016. I was that, and then I was a Pirates ball girl. And then pretty much once the fall of 2016 hit, that's when everything really started taking off in my career. I started going to grad school at Point Park University. But then I also got my first job at a radio station producing at 93.7 The Fan, which is the sports radio station in town. I then got my first on-camera job, again in hockey with the Pittsburgh Penguins ECHL team, the Wheeling Nailers, as their in-arena host.
Okay.
And then a month later after that, so that's September, October, November, I got another on-camera job as the in-game host and reporter for the Pittsburgh Riverhounds. And then in December, Root Sports was changing over to AT&T. And that's whenever they decided, hey, like, you're no longer an intern for us. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, this was some of my income for like the next couple of months until the end of hockey season. And they were like, well, joke's on you because we're bringing you on.
Wow.
And that's when they made the social media coordinator position for myself. And then Kevin Wheeler, who was kind of like my sidekick there, like my brother, I always joke.
I worked with him at WPTS at University of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, he's awesome. I'm pretty sure he's still at the University of Pittsburgh.
Really good. Yeah, really talented.
Yes, very, very talented. So I worked with him for a period of time, but then in January of 2017, I was offered another position at the Pirates. So I'm still ball girling there, but then they also wanted me to, they also still wanted me to co-host on the big screen. So basically, like, I would do pregame reads for them about Rita's or the designated driver booth. And so I did that. And then Joe Klimchak, who's the main in-game host, he took over the rest of the game. So by the summer of 2017, I literally had, and I swear nobody believes it, but I had 6 jobs and I was attending grad school. And I swear to you, wow. I survived it and I lived it and it happened. So whenever I get to this September of 2017, I always say, if I could survive that month, then I could literally survive anything. So at this point, when I look to September of 2017, of course, the Nailer season is done by then. A lot of seasons are winding down, but I'll count for you right now. I'm still producing at the radio station. I'm still ball girling. I'm still social media coordinating. I'm still working for the Pittsburgh Riverhounds. I'm still co-hosting. And then on top of that, I picked up a part-time job at my gym. And I was starting work at 5 a.m. and I was working there until about 11 a.m. And then I'd go and do all my other jobs for the day. Between that, if I had any homework or if I had to go to class, I would. But if I had work, I would just simply skip class just because I told my teachers and students, if you're anyone who's listening, don't ever repeat to a teacher that I said this, but I said, look, I'm learning more sitting on a TV truck or being at a ballpark or being at a radio station than I am sitting in a research class reading a book. And they understood it whenever I put it like that. And if they didn't understand it, then I'd be like, okay, well, I'm making just as much in this one night to pay for this class. So at the end of the day, I don't really feel bad, considering I put myself through school at that time too. So September of 2017, like I said, super crazy. Basically, I'd start work at 5 a.m. and I wouldn't get off until like 11 p.m., 11:30 at night. Very, very crazy. I'd work like 3-4 different jobs pretty much on a daily basis. Like I said, do not know
how you did it.
The best part is I'm not like a huge coffee drinker. So if I had maybe 1 cup of coffee a day, that was it. So then that brings me to December of 2017, whenever Point Park actually offered to pay for me to go to the baseball winter meetings. And if you're not familiar with what that is, it's basically MLB and minor league baseball. They hold these meetings every single year in one spot. It's usually like a destination kind of place. So that year was Orlando, Florida. Sometimes it's Nashville. I think last year was San Diego. So really, really cool spots to go and visit, but then also take part in these meetings. And it's basically so like all the minor and major league teams can get together in like a local place during the off season and have important discussions about what's going to go on during the season. But then there's also a section that is a job fair. The Point Park University, they paid for me to be a part of this job fair and basically try to find a position within baseball. So I went down there and I had resumes and I had an elevator pitch. I had these awesome reels on a DVD for people. And I was completely prepared and I applied to so many things that I definitely didn't belong in. And then there were some that I definitely was way overqualified for at that point with how much experience I had. And I thought I was going to go down there, and I'll admit it was a little bit cocky of me, but I was like, I'm going to get a lot of interviews. I had 4.
Wow. Okay.
I was down there for a week, and there were kids that went on the trip from Point Park too, who didn't have any experience at all. And they were having interview after interview after interview. So that was kind of a hard pill to swallow, because I was like, okay, what's going on? Why am I not getting
Traction
an
here.
interview
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
yeah. In one of my interviews, it barely even counts, because it was actually somebody that I had known from the Altoona Curve, and he literally just wanted to sit down and talk for an hour about everything going on in Pittsburgh. That was basically it. So if we look at that, in the grand scheme of things, it was 3. I left with one job offer that was in New York City, that I wouldn't have even been able to live in a cardboard box on the sidewalk with how much money they were offering, and I had to unfortunately decline.
Sure.
And then my other offer was with the Salem Red Sox for the 2018 season to be their media and graphics assistant in their on-field host. So I brought this offer home and I brought it back to Pittsburgh, and I, talked to everybody at AT&T, everybody at the Pirates, everybody at the Fan. I was like, should I take this? And it got to the point where I let the offer go for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then finally, Dan Potash, Dan Savran, a couple of the big names that work for AT&T Sports Network, they kind of sat me down, and specifically Stan, I remember his exact words. He said, look, it's kind of like you're on a treadmill here. You're doing great things, but you're not getting anywhere. And when he kind of said that, he was right. Like, yeah, I was doing all these great things and I was getting recognized by everybody, but it was kind of like, I almost felt like a circus show, because I was taking so much on, but I wasn't getting anywhere.
Yeah.
So I was this person who had all these jobs, and it's great, but like, that didn't make me the next sideline reporter for the Pittsburgh Pirates, So after, like, literally the next day, I called up Alan, the guy who offered me the job in Salem. I was like, okay, like, I'll be down there in a month. So of course, like, I cried for probably 3 weeks straight. And
leaving Pittsburgh, or you didn't
yeah,
want to?
basically I was just like,
Yeah.
so upset, because what I don't think a lot of people realize, and this goes back to me joking about, like, people didn't realize like how many jobs I had at one point, is I was leaving so much. Like, I was leaving 6 jobs, 5 of them were literally in what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it was discouraging, because I was like, why can't I make this work here with everything I have going on? So I shipped down to Salem, Virginia, my first season there. And I get to about April, and at this point I'm 25 years old, and they paid for my housing, but other than that, I was only making $500 a month, which is crazy when you think about it, because I still have bills at that point. Like, I wasn't paying for school because I was still in grad school. I was still finishing up grad school, which nobody knows. That first season in Salem, I'm working towards my master's degree until April. So April kind of hits, and it's actually really funny. I finally, like, turn in my final paper, and I find out, like, hey, you passed, like, you graduated. And I was sitting at my desk one day, and I had this idea of, I came across a couple of articles on some of the female broadcasters in minor league baseball, and I realized that there were only 3 at that time. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. I was like, I'm kind of bummed I can't do that. And then I kind of had this revelation, like, no, why can't I?
Yeah.
So I went to my GM, I went to my assistant GM, and then I went to my broadcaster, and I was like, hey, can I try to hop on a couple of broadcasts with Ben? And if it's not too bad, then can we just, like, make it a thing? I said, so mind you, also I'm a female, so this is a huge deal. So they said absolutely, but they couldn't pay for my hotel when I went on the road. They were not going to pay for my travel. They wouldn't pay for,
because they're operating on a single A budget right now. This is single A baseball, so yeah.
Yes, but at the same time, it was also because, like, hey, we're not going to pay for a female to be on the road.
Okay.
And that's just how it is. I mean, it's different for a female to ride the bus. Like, the guys wouldn't be used to that. Like, so it was more to, like, make sure that nobody was uncomfortable. And I completely understood. And I was like, okay, whatever, on my $500 budget, I'm going to make this work. So I paid for my hotel when I'd go. I'd pay for my food. I'd pay for my gas, whatever. And it took until probably, so mind you, also this season that's going on, I'm traveling when I can for Salem. When we're having home stretches or home games, it's like I'm getting at the office at 8:30 in the morning. We're there until 11 p.m. at night. And then because I'm making so little money and I'm trying to pay for what I can on the road, I'm also going home every chance I can. And I'm still freelancing for the TV station up there and ball girling when I can.
Wow.
So I'm working basically still.
So what's keeping you going at this point? Just motivation? Like what?
Just motivation, especially after. So whenever I start broadcasting, Obviously, like, it kind of hit some waves. And one of the big things whenever I left Pittsburgh was,
Hmm.
you need to go to this small town and you need to make a name for yourself and you need to figure it out.
Yeah.
That's literally what they said. And they were right. So whenever it's April and then May 4th hits and it's like, hey, Suzie Cool's the first female broadcaster in the Carolina League, I'm up on the everybody's big screen in Pittsburgh during the Pittsburgh Pirates game that night, and they're talking about
That's
what
incredible.
I've done to get there.
And
It's Joe Block.
Pittsburgh's also a proud community too. So I'm familiar
Mm-hmm.
with it. Obviously, you were born and raised there. The people there love Pittsburgh. If you're from Pittsburgh,
Yes.
they love you. So I'm sure they're very proud of you back at home too.
Yes, and that was the thing. It was literally AT&T Sports Network. They showed my picture from that day. Joe Block or whoever it was that was on the air gave me a shout out. They were like, this is what she did to get here. Like, she still has a way to
Mhm.
go, but like, great for you, Suzie. Like, it was awesome. So just always having that in the back of my mind, like, hey, this is home. Like, I'm supposed to be getting back here. Like, let's do this. So like I said, what's keeping me going is that thought of like, okay, I can come home. So what a lot of people don't know is, and this is before we even get, like I said, I could go on for an hour about this.
Yeah,
I'm trying to
yeah.
make this as short as possible, but by the time like the end of August hits that year, I go to a hotel and I go to check out and they're like, yeah, I'm sorry, sweetie, but like your card's declined. And I'm like, oh, good, because I'm supposed to be on the road for the next 4 days or something like that.
Sure.
And at 25 years old, embarrassingly enough, I had to call my dad and say, hey, dad, like, can you please give me like $200, like, or I'm going to be sleeping in my car for the next 4 days.
Hmm.
Like, that's the reality of it, of what we do. And for honestly, like, you have to love what you do because it's not for the money.
And you have a
um
strong, it sounds like the people back at home, obviously,
mhm.
they mean a lot to you. So that having that foundation, your father, your
Yes.
parents, it's pushing you forward and your friends and family,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
so important. Yeah,
You have to have some support in what you do, or
sure.
you'll never last. So that happens. Then about 2 weeks later, the season ends, and at this point I'm supposed to go home. But before I go home, I'm actually offered a full-time position with Salem as their marketing and promo manager, their on-field host, and then still doing color analyst work for the next season. But I tell them, hey, hold up. And you know, no one really knows this, but I had a job offer on the line with the Pittsburgh Penguins at that time. So
Okay,
I was waiting to hear back from the Pens. And even though it was just a part-time gig, it would have still brought me home and it still would have been a step up. And I would have kind of been able to do what I was doing before, but then also had this position with the Penguins.
sure.
So I told Salem, hey, once I hear back from the Pens, I'll let you know. But like, this is big league as opposed to like me staying here. And they were like, 100%, we completely understand. So I remember it like it was yesterday. It was September 8th, 2018. I pack up my car and I'm headed back to Pittsburgh. I'm blasting music the whole time. I'm so excited because my parents don't even like, they're not expecting for me to like be home just yet. Pull into my driveway and I stay at the top of it because I'm trying to surprise them when I walk in. I'm like, I'm just going to check my email like super quick to see if I got anything. And I check it and I have an email saying, hey, like, you didn't get the job.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the
And
stuff that obviously I see you through the lens of Instagram, Facebook.
mm-hmm.
We occasionally are in contact, just kind of all that stuff. This is the stuff behind the scenes. It's
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, that you don't see every day.
that you don't
Yeah,
see. Yeah. And you mentioned Instagram. It's like, yeah, we all put our highlights on there. And
exactly.
I think it's like, it's funny when I think about what some people actually think of me. And I'm like, you have no idea, like the heartbreak or like the hard work that I put
Sure,
into.
of
It's just
course.
like, you might assume like, oh, like she's bubbly and she's fun and like, yeah, she's got all these jobs. Like, no, I've been through some things. Like, there's been moments of no money. There's been moments where I thought I was like this close to
How do
coming
you keep
home.
up the
And
energy without coffee?
yeah, I don't know. I'm
How do you
still
do
exactly, I'm almost
that?
28 years
How
old
do
at
you
this
do it?
point, and
Yeah,
I'm just like
yeah,
hyper as always.
that's good. Yeah.
So anyways, I get that heartbreaking email and I go into my house and I act like everything's fine. I'm
Mhm.
like, I got a ball girl tomorrow, like whatever. It was like Jesus or God, whatever you believe in, knew that I needed a day just to process stuff, or a couple days, because the next day it started just pouring. And a Pirates game is never canceled before you leave the house for a Sunday game. And my boss already had texted me by the time I woke up and was like, hey, we're not going to play today. So like,
Yeah.
don't bother coming down. So I literally no joke, I stayed in my room for 3 days. I think I was in it until like Tuesday. And then whenever I finally came out, my parents were like, "Are you okay? What's up?" And I was like, "Look, I didn't get the job. Like, I'm going back to Salem in 3 weeks."
Mhm.
And this was because before I even went to Salem, I promised Pittsburgh that with that last month in September of Pirates baseball, I would finish up ball girling and I would finish up with the TV station. So for 3 weeks, I worked after that Tuesday every single night, whether the Pirates were on the road or whether they were at home, between the TV station and ball girling. I worked every single night until the day that I left to go back down to Salem to be able, because I was only making $500 a month before I even came back for that 3
Yeah.
weeks. I made enough to cover my apartment, to cover some of the furniture and stuff that I got off of Amazon, but like that's what I had to do. So I didn't even really get to spend any time with my family or my friends. It was like I just had to ship myself back down. So I go back down to Salem, like early October, end of September of 2018. And I start my full-time position with them as the marketing and promo manager, on-field host, color analyst. And that was kind of like my role for the 2019 season. And there were definitely some hiccups whenever we tried to hire a brand new, like full-time play-by-play announcer going into the 2019 season. Originally, we hired a kid that Dom Catronio, his dad's actually one of the voices for the Oakland A's.
Okay.
Super excited about him. He ends up getting a job in Double-A. Super happy for him, because whenever you're like a broadcaster in sports, it's kind of like being a player. If you get the call up to the next level, you 100% have to go. You can't blame anybody for taking that opportunity.
Sure.
So that kind of, it was like basically 2 months before the season started, and we were in search of a new broadcaster again. And that's when Melanie Newman had reached out, who she's now with the Baltimore Orioles. She reached out and she's like, "Hey, like I actually am a free agent right now. What's going on with this?" So I had this idea back in October, before we even hired Dom, to have an all-female broadcasting booth. And no females applied at that time. So when Melanie reached out, it was like the stars had aligned. Let's go. Let's make this happen. And when we announced that she was going to be the number one and I was going to be the number two for select road games, it hit the airwaves. I mean, that same night, I'm looking at sportsillustrated.com. I'm on there. I'm in the Boston Globe one day. I'm in the Roanoke Times. I'm on Yahoo Sports. You looked at a sports website, our faces were plastered on it. It was incredible. And that gave me like a little bit of like what you're saying, like how do you keep the energy, how do you keep going? When I saw that, I was like,
you saw it.
And that's February 2018 or 2019 at this point. I'm like, oh, like I got to take advantage of this. So we go into the season and I am literally running around the ballpark every single day, basically like a chicken with my head cut off.
Sure.
Like, because when you're the marketing and promo manager, you're running social media, you're writing the scripts for the PA announcer, I'm on field hosting, I'm getting the promo crew ready, I'm making all the graphics for the big screen, and I'm making a Dropbox to make everything go up on the big screen. I'm clocking people's hours. I'm making sure that X, Y, and Z is okay. If we have a promotion, I'm making sure it's getting out to the gate. Usually, for some reason, I was always the person taking it out to the gate by myself, box after box after box, whatever.
How do you stay organized? Just not to butt in.
Every single day in my agenda, I would write down exactly what I needed to do. Like, even if it was super repetitive, like I would write film keys to the game, edit, check game script, check graphics, like every little thing.
Sure.
I would make sure was in there, and then I would just cross it off as I went. And it got to the point where it's like I almost memorized exactly what I needed to do. So it was like, okay, once I get there at 8, I need to go film my keys. I need to edit them. Then I need to check the Dropbox. Then I need to check to make sure we have all the graphics. I need to check the script. Like,
but this is an all day thing. You're
there from 8, and if you're eating lunch at your desk, and basically your break is during the game, because I'm on field hosting, but that's really all I have to care about, because I've done so much work to prepare everybody to be able to do, everybody else to be able to do their job, that if they can't do it at that point, then I don't know what's going on. You know what I'm saying? So basically that was just like a day in the life during this job. And then it also got to a point too where Melanie had other obligations like friends' weddings, or her sister had a baby shower, or she had to do some stuff for ESPN. Completely understandable. So she would be gone for like weekends or so at a time. But then that meant that I took over her job. So not only am I doing everything that I'm doing, but now I'm writing game notes, I'm getting rosters ready, I'm printing stats packs, I'm making sure the radio is set up, I'm making sure all the commercials work, and then I'm writing a now rundown for whoever comes in and on-field host. But on top of that, I have to find somebody to come in and replace me on the field.
Yeah.
And then I have to also make sure that like my assistant Rebecca was ready, the promo crew's ready, whatever. And then I'm usually down there running pregame until 6:50, and I run up to the broadcasting booth and I'm on the air by 7:05. It was insane. It was absolutely insane.
At any point, did you think back to your time in Pittsburgh and kind of wish you were still back at Root, or was it kind of you were so busy and there was so much excitement in the air that it kept you going?
So I was so busy that I didn't have time for that. But I will say, yes, like time to even, think or breathe. And it did get to a point where during the season, it was about July, I kind of was just like, I'm burnt out. And my dad actually came down and he visited me, and it was after a game and something went wrong, and it should have been something that somebody had checked. And it was someone who, to be honest, like didn't check things on the regular. And it was very frustrating to me because then it ruined everything that I was supposed to do that night and had everything set. So after the game, I will admit, like, when you're under that much stress, like emotions, like they can go like this. And I'm not an emotional person. I don't cry. Like I'm always super happy and bubbly. And I remember I got home that night and I just started bawling my eyes out. And my dad just looked at me. He's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "No, I'm not, Dad. Like, I'm not okay." I was like, "I'm stressed. Like, I'm always doing X, Y, and Z." I was like, "I know I put this on myself and I'm super overwhelmed, but like, what in the world?" And he's like, he looked at me at that point. He's like, "Look, if you can't do this, like, it's okay." He's like, "If you came back to Pittsburgh now," he's like, "Suzie, look at everything you've done. Nobody would be mad at you. Nobody would judge you. Like, you're fine." He's like, "Ride out the rest of the season. But if you have to make a change, like, it's okay to do that." And it was kind of like that point where I was like, oh no, like my dad, who never tells me to quit anything, is telling me like, "Hey, like, I don't know, like if this is healthy for you anymore." So it was that point where I started applying to like all these other jobs, whether it was
maybe that's what you needed. You needed to hear that at that time, right?
Yes, I think it was like the little pep talk I needed, especially at that point in the season. So at this point, I started applying to all these jobs, and I had a couple of interviews. Long story short, at this point, it's actually tomorrow that will be like 1 year of the Rochester Americans offering me the position that I have now as their multimedia journalist, in their in-arena host and sideline reporter. But if you would have asked me in July if I was going to be there, I would have told you no. Like, I'm probably going to ship myself back to Pittsburgh. And I say this in the most sincere way possible. And I've said it on multiple podcasts and multiple articles. If it weren't for Rochester, like, I don't think I'd still be doing what I'm doing. And I 100% say, like, Rochester saved me. Like, they saved me from being like, I'm throwing in the towel and this is it.
Wow.
So
like I said, you ended up at a good organization, incredible.
Yes. And it's like I think the coolest part is, so in Salem, I was doing all these really cool things. I was on-field hosting, I was doing this, but like here I'm doing exactly what I want to do. I'm writing stories on people. I'm actually, when I do videos, I'm actually being informative about the team, and I'm kind of doing a keys to the game, but it's called a game preview here. I do interviews every single day. Like, I'm doing what I've always wanted to do. I can't complain. That this is my dream. Is it at the NHL? Is it at the MLB level? No, but it's close enough. Like, if this was it, I'd be okay with that. Like, I've done good. So,
and it's really as close as you can get at the AHL level to be at the NHL, because I know the Rochester Americans have a huge history. They're close. It's close enough to Buffalo. The fans are crazy in a good way, right? They're extremely passionate. Kind of reminds me of Pittsburgh fans, based off of being there and from what I'm reading. So that's incredible.
Yeah, actually, whenever they flew me up for my interview last year, the first thing I told my parents was, "This feels like home."
Sure.
You know, and it's not like Salem never felt like home. I was there for 2 years, but the people were different. They weren't like city people, I guess, which I think city people get a negative connotation, but it was like my first Uber ride from the airport to the hotel. I still remember it. I had this man named Kenny, and he was the sweetest, nicest guy. And he was like, Suzie, you're going to get this job. And he's like, it's going to be snowy, so we got to make sure you have snow boots and you have a beanie. He's like, but I believe in you. And I was like, I don't even know this man. He's telling me I'm going to get this job. I was like, I love this city. Let's freaking go.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's great.
So you wear many hats. You've made it work out for yourself. You're in Rochester now. Tell me a little bit about working for the Amherst. In addition to what you already described, what's it like day to day having more autonomy, like getting to do what it is, like what you want to do?
So it's definitely nice, and I think it's definitely a little more relaxed for me. And I'll be honest with you, the people here are great. Like everybody has a job and they do it. And that's one thing when I go to an organization, and I think I was like so spoiled within Pittsburgh because I worked with, the Pens, or I worked
Professionals. I mean, not
yeah,
that they're
I
not
worked
professionals, but the highest level.
Yeah, I worked at the highest level. So whenever I would, go to Salem, it's people that are like just in their first job, and they might not understand, like, no, this wouldn't be acceptable, like to not get this done, or this wouldn't be acceptable for this not to work if you're at PNC Park and you have a game in 3 hours.
Sure.
So here it's like everybody does their job. They are the utmost professional people. They want to put the best product out there. Every video I do, every story I do, 3 different people look over it, because guess what? If it's not good, they don't want to put it out. And that makes complete 100% sense. So kind of, I'll describe like a game day. I think that's the best thing, because
For our listeners, especially those who are interested in.
so a game day, I roll in the office around 9 o'clock, and we always have a morning skate that starts at 10. So basically I'll look over the game notes for that night, and then I'll look at which the game notes have what they did in the games prior, but then I'll also just look at the guy's stats, and I'll be like, hey, so-and-so, Taylor Lear did really good against the Utica Comets. In the 6 games that he's played against them, he's already had 5 goals, 3 assists. Let's talk to him about his offensive power against them.
Sure.
So what I'll do is I'll pick like 3 or 4 guys to interview, or like 3 guys and a coach to interview after morning skate is done. So basically from like 9 till about like 10:30, I'm prepping. At 10:30 to probably 11, I'm going back and I'm conducting these interviews with the guys. Once that's done, I have, like I mentioned, something that's called a game preview that I then go up with my camera girl. Her name's Cassie. We go up on like in the stand somewhere, like by ice level, and we tape it. And it's basically like, I'll take the interviews that I had, and this is something else I do before morning skate is over, is like I'll write my script for the day while I'm looking over the game notes. So I'll take my script and I'll remember what some of the guys say during the interviews, and I kind of just do little stand-up. So I'm like, oh, tonight's the 7th matchup between your Rochester Americans and the Binghamton Devils. This is a winner takes all kind of series, like, and then whatever. So we film that, then we go down and we edit it together to how like we really want to piece it together. She's great. She's like super particular about it. So she makes sure that noise matches and like all the video looks good, whatever. After that is over, it's probably around like 12:30. So like obviously a little bit of lunch, but then if I have any stories that I need to finish, because you got to think about it, I'm working for 2 teams. So I'm usually like finishing up a story, whether it's for the Amherst or the Nighthawks, or if there's like a Nighthawks game the next day, I'm going through and I'm making sure that I am completely prepared for whatever TV hits I have. So I always do a keys to the game segment for them. And then I have at least like 4 interviews during the game. So I'm making sure that I'm going through and I have questions or I have stories lined up in case they throw it down to me on VR Live. But then really it's kind of just like whatever you have on your plate at that time. I always try, like I mentioned, the stories, to write like 2-3 stories a week. Obviously that doesn't always happen because sometimes we have more video content than we do written pieces. But then it's kind of just like hanging out until the game. We have a pregame spread, kind of like we did with the Pens, but then before the game, like 2 hours before the game, we have a game day meeting, and then it's like getting ready and basically being out and about in the arena to like hang out with the fans or hang out with the program crew, whatever. As the game's going on, I'm the in-arena host, so I'm doing the promotional hits throughout the game, and then once my last hit is done, I go to the back and I have to conduct the post-game interviews. If we win, I go on the ice. I do really short, like one question one. If we lose, obviously I'm not doing that one. But that's also to say that during the game, while I'm also doing all of these live hits, I am also trying to watch as closely as I can the game to take notes on my phone so I know what's going on. I'm not going into the interviews like, hey, what happened? Can somebody let me know?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of juggling stuff. But then
You're used to that at this point. So
yes, I'm used to that at this point. So if that's the most I have to do, that's pretty
yeah.
incredible. So then once I do the post-game interviews, pretty much that's all over.
Okay.
So the biggest difference, like I guess on a lacrosse day, is I'm sideline reporting, but I'm still doing live hits during the game, but it's a little easier for me. I can sit in the back and take notes on my computer. So I'm really prepped for my post-game interviews. And then for lacrosse, we were kind of splitting it. I kind of had like a work brother, Ryan. He would always do Amerks post-game recaps, and I was doing the lacrosse post-game recaps.
Sure.
And basically that's just like a story on like what happened in the game and whatnot. And I will tell you this, I would much rather have the hockey ones, because lacrosse, you have to describe every single goal. And I definitely got the short end of the stick.
Let me ask you something about lacrosse. I don't know how, because I was in Pittsburgh in college. I don't know how
It
familiar you're
is,
with lacrosse, right? Before.
yeah.
What are your thoughts on the sport?
I didn't know anything about it. It was kind of like hockey. I kind of went into it blind.
Sure.
I actually bought a Lacrosse for Dummies book before the season started, and I sat and I read that. I got about halfway through, and then I was like, I just gotta watch it, because I think what's difficult is you read that book, but it's kind of like it's talking primarily about field lacrosse, and we're box lacrosse, and they're actually they're similar, but they're also very different in their own like respect. So it's more just like watching the games, or if I have time to go out and watch shoot around in the morning, then I go and I watch that, or I sit down once a week during the season and I talk with the GM about upcoming games, and anything that I ask, like I'm comfortable to be like, okay, what happened on this play? Or like, can you describe to me like why we made this move in the third quarter? Kind of stuff like that. So it's something that I'm 100% still learning. Like I can wholeheartedly admit, even though I worked in it for pretty much a season now, it's hard, but at the same time, a lot of people describe it like hockey. I'm not necessarily seeing that connection, but
I don't see the connection. I actually see the connection soccer to hockey more.
Yeah.
In a way than, lacrosse. I've watched box lacrosse before, because Philadelphia used to have a team, and a lot of it's more different than field lacrosse, meaning a lot more trick shots.
Yeah.
It's really close quarters, but it's fun to watch. It's entertaining.
Yeah. No, it is entertaining. Like it's not like soccer where there's only a couple of goals a game, or even like hockey. I mean, there's a goal. Somebody could go and run up the floor and score, and then all of a sudden like there's a turnover or a loose ball and somebody picks it up and they score. It's ridiculous. It's like it could happen like that. And when it happens, it is so fast. And that was one of the things like I would do in the back is I would listen to the broadcast and I'd be like, okay, how did they say he like did that? Oh, it was a 3/4 shot, or it was this. And I'm like, all right, like, so I'd have to like go back on BR Live as it's on the TV in the background. I'm like, okay, so this is what a 3/4 shot is. Okay, we're learning.
And
you're
working for BR Live right now. So
yes,
why don't you talk a little bit more about that? So I did briefly go over your LinkedIn. There's so much stuff jammed in there, but what is BR Live?
Yes. So BR Live is Bleacher Report Live. So obviously they have a ton of different sporting events on their website. I'm pretty sure they have like an app you can download too to watch everything. But it's nothing too crazy. Like basically I still work for the Rochester Nighthawks, but during those games I actually have to be like team neutral. So whenever I go over the keys to the game, I can't just talk about the Nighthawks. I also have to talk about the New York Riptide. And when I'm interviewing guys, I'm not just interviewing Nighthawks players, I'm also interviewing like New York Riptide people or the Calgary Roughnecks people. And that's something that, I didn't go over, but whenever I'm prepping for these games, so say we have a hockey game on Friday and then lacrosse on Saturday, that 4-hour window that I have after we're done taping game preview and editing it, I'm going over both rosters and I'm looking at the leading scorers, or I'm looking at the guy who has the penalty minutes that's going to start the fight, or I'm looking at the history on the head coach. So it's difficult, and especially in lacrosse, it's not like hockey or baseball where you're facing these teams multiple times throughout the season, so you kind of get familiar with them. It's kind of like football. We might face the same team maybe twice.
Sure.
So like you're never seeing the same player. So you're
Yeah.
doing all this studying for a 60-minute game and you might never see the guy again. So it's pretty intense.
Yeah, you mentioned head coach. One thing I do want you to cover, I saw your article about the
Mm-hmm.
Amherst new head coach.
Yeah.
For any Amherst fans that are listening, why don't you talk about him? Because I know you had a chance to talk to the new Amherst coach.
Yeah, I had, it was actually pretty crazy. I'd done a lot of, I guess, sit down interviews over this time period. And I thought that like 13 minutes was really long. And whenever I talked to him, I talked to him for 26 minutes. So I was pretty blown away. But no, Seth Appert, he's the 33rd head coach in franchise history. And he is just like, he is as awesome and as real as it gets. And he's super professional too. When you talk to him, it's not just a guy who's going to throw out an answer. He's going to listen to what you ask, and then he's going to answer, and you're going to be like, wow, like you actually put thought into that. But I think what the Amherst fans and kind of what Rochester is going to see this season is a guy who really knows how to develop his talent. I don't know how much you read up on him, but he has 20 plus years in college coaching. And then he just spent the last 3 years with the national training development program with USA Hockey. He has seen literally the best talent in all of the country, not just ours, but like in other countries as well, because it's not just USA playing Georgia, it's USA playing Sweden, or it's USA playing Finland. Like he's seen a lot of people. But I think that's what I'm most excited for, is that's what Rochester at the end of the day, like, yeah, we're about winning and we're about being the best in the AHL or the North Division, whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, we're also here to make these guys the best that they can be for when they go up to Buffalo. And I really, truly think that he's going to be able to do that. I have
And it's
100.
interesting. I don't mean to cut you off there, but it's interesting you mentioned his collegiate experience, because I read a couple of the comments, the avid fans' comments on the YouTube post and everything, and it seemed like the one criticism or thing that individuals are a little bit anxious about is the fact that he has so much college experience and less pro experience. But you kind of answered my question there. I think fundamentally, having developed so many players, he knows what it takes to get them to improve at the Amherst level and then ready for Buffalo.
Yeah, and you also have to think about this too. So yeah, he has the 20 plus years of coaching at the college level, but 23 players that have come through his program, at least 23 players that we know of, have graduated to go on and play at some point in the AHL. So he's clearly developed some level of talent to be able to play at the highest level in our country. Not only that, like I said, he's training the best, probably some of the best athletes that we don't even know about when he's with USA Hockey. And he's developing them not only to be drafted when they're 18, 17 years old, and then to start their pro career when they're 19. He's also down there developing them to play at the college level. So no, it's not like he doesn't have any of this pro experience or whatever. He literally has just been sitting there developing players to move on to that next level. And when you look at his 20 years in college coaching, it's not like he was coaching at a D3 school.
Yeah,
like he's coaching at good programs. He's coaching at Division I programs. So a little more give credit where credit's due.
No, I think that's very, very fair. And then, one thing I want to ask you, because it seems like a lot of your experience is based around game day, right? I got to bring COVID into it with everything that going on. I know as a sports fan, both of us are huge sports fans. It's been tough. As someone who works in sports currently, like yourself, what have you been doing day to day? Probably a lot of Skypes and a lot of different things like that, right?
Yeah, so right now it's such a weird time period, and like whenever it first happened, I was absolutely lost, because before this happened, I had an absolute routine, and we were in the middle of a span of 2 weeks where we had like 9 or 10 games. Like it was crazy whenever this all hit. So I was like in this groove of waking up at 5 a.m, getting my workout done by 6:30, 7 o'clock. I'd go to the office. Like I was just insane. So when this all happened at first, like I honestly hit panic mode, and I would write like 7 articles a week. I was calling guys for interviews, and then I started getting into the Skype stuff. Now it's a little bit more relaxed because our season is slated to start December 4th, but at the same time, we don't really know what we're working with until the NHL is completely finished. We won't exactly know. So it's a little bit more relaxed, but basically it's kind of what kind of content we need, or what kind of content I can think of to put out currently. So if we're looking at this week, we had an Amherst alumni Zoom event. So like I prepped to talk to 5 Amherst Hall of Famers last night for an entire hour with some of our season ticket members.
Okay.
Next week, I'm looking at talking to 2 of the new incoming Amherst players that will be on our upcoming roster for next season. So I'll do a ton of research, like I said, make like an entire list of questions, send it over to my boss, and then we'll do the Skype interviews at some point. Also next week is our Nll Draft. So that's next Thursday. And then the next Monday, I will start interviewing all of the guys that have been drafted for us to look ahead for their season. So it's a lot of Skype interviews. It's a lot of writing. If there's any events out in the community and I can go to them, I try to go to them as long as everything's super safe and super healthy. But a lot of working out in between then, and then I've actually started to read some books just because
I picked up reading too.
I'm not a reader, but I was like, I'm spending so much time on my cell phone, getting in my own head, and I'm sure it happens with everybody in this industry, getting in my own head.
A lot of books here.
Yeah, that's awesome. But I just like, honestly, I was getting in my own head about like where I was at in like COVID, and I'm not getting any further because I feel like I've still been doing stuff, but I haven't been like doing games or this or that, because before this all happened, I was lined up to be with the Syracuse Mets for the entire summer. I was
going to ask you about that. I saw that. Yeah.
So, I was supposed to on-field host. I was supposed to hop on a couple of broadcasts. I was supposed to help run social media. And obviously that didn't happen. So this has been the weirdest summer for me in 7 years.
Well, maybe you needed a little bit of not a break because you're still working, but at the same time, it might be kind of nice to be at home a little bit more, whether that's Pittsburgh or Rochester. And one more thing I want to ask you, obviously you're very happy with the Amherst. You are starting to really love hockey. It seems like you're getting a passion for hockey here. Ultimately, what would you love to do if you could, your dream job, if you don't mind answering that question?
So that's so crazy. And I love when people ask me that anymore, because when I look at everything, or when I look at when I first started, my answer was always, oh, I want to be the sideline reporter for the Pittsburgh Pirates. But then I look at all this cool stuff that I've done. Like, not many females can be like, yeah, I've broadcasted baseball games, and I was a part of the first all-female broadcast booth in professional baseball, or hey, I'm the multimedia journalist for an AHL affiliate. Like, all these things that I've done have been so cool, and I couldn't have seen myself here when I first started as a Pirates ball girl 6-7 years ago. So I don't exactly know what my answer is. Obviously, I would love to be in baseball. I'd love to do some kind of analyst or play-by-play work along with reporting on the team, but I also really like being a multimedia journalist for a team. I like being outright kind of hired by them. Oh my goodness, there's a bee. But I like being kind of outright hired by them, just because it's like, you are with the team. Like, the players know that like you're their reporter, you're going to put out the good stories, you're not going to do anything that's going to make them look bad or embarrass them. So I think if I could just end up with a team, whether that's in the NHL or it's with a team in the MLB, or maybe even the NFL, who knows what sport it is, I would be super happy kind of doing what I do. But also, like, if I was able to wear multiple hats and do different kind of things, like write stories, but also do the social media kind of like on air stuff. But then if I could call a couple ball games, like, that would be awesome. Kind of more like, let's focus on what I've set out to do, rather than doing like, okay, yeah, she can do graphics and like all that kind of stuff.
So it sounds like it's kind of, you're enjoying the journey, which is the most important thing, right? Not to be all philosophical. And that's the thing. Here. I don't want to put like, hey, like, this is what I need to do.
because
You'll
I
drive
think
yourself crazy. You'll drive yourself crazy, right?
And I think I've done that to myself for so long. And I'm finally just at the point, and I said this to you when we started, Rochester, 100%, they saved me. And if this was it, and I got to hang out with my boss, Warren, for the next 8 years, and I became this well-known multimedia journalist here for the Buffalo Sabres highest affiliate, is that really that bad? No, that still is really, really cool. Like, that still is really, really awesome. And there's not that many people that can say they've done that.
Yeah, well, they're lucky to have you. And why don't you give our listeners just some more advice, one piece of advice, maybe in 2 sentences, for anyone who's interested in maybe replicating your career, doing something similar to what you do day to day.
Okay, I think it might not be in 2 sentences, but I'll try to keep it short and sweet. This is probably the best piece of advice that I can give anyone, and it's something that my first boss at AT&T Sports Network ever told me. Every day that you stay in the business, somebody else drops out. And I'll get a little deeper into it, but like I mentioned in my story, there were days where I didn't have enough money in my bank account. I ate ramen noodles for probably a 6-month span at one point. I didn't know what my next step was. There were sleepless nights. There's the comparing yourself to everybody else on Instagram, on Twitter, on their highlight reels, whatever you name it. And a lot of people, they sit there and they're having those same thoughts, and they're in their bed, or they're on their couch, or they're at their day job, and they're like, yep, I'm giving up. Don't be that person that does it, because I promise the longer that you stay in it, the longer you persevere, somebody's going to see that and be like, hey, I want you to work for us. Let's go.
That's very empowering. I feel motivated. I hope our listeners do too.
Let's go.
Yeah. So Suzie Cool, thank you again for joining us today.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you. And for our listeners, if you enjoyed today's episode of the S.B.R. podcast, please follow me on Twitter at SBR_podcast. I am also on Instagram at the same handle, SBR_podcast. And if you feel the need to provide any further feedback, please visit www.sportsbusinessreview, the official home of the S.B.R. podcast. And to add even more information, we're also on YouTube now at Sports Business Review. So hope you guys enjoyed. Enjoy the rest of your week.